All right, let's get this thing on the road. I am Luke McCormick, sell ear on various platforms, including Drupal.org. On behalf of the Drop Times, I have the pleasure and honor to interview DDev project lead Randy Fay, who is here with me now. How are you doing this morning, Randy?
Hey there, it's great to talk to you. Yeah, I'm Randy Fay. I'm R Fay in most of the places, Randy Fay in a few of them, and old friend of the Drupal community. Lots of great friends there, and great history.
Yeah. Now, I'm familiar with some of your history, but let me give you a chance to share it with our viewers, if you can. I know you have a particularly interesting story about your introduction to the world of technology, so
Well, I right these days, the lead maintainer of the DDev project. DDev is a local development environment for mostly PHP projects, web projects. And Drupal uses it quite extensively, along with many other CMSs. For example, Typo 3, it's their default, it's in their docs, and Craft CMS, and several other CMSs. So that's what I spend all day doing is working on DDev and supporting it, just working on that whole thing. Um, I I have worked with lots of tech over the years and done all kinds of things. Um, I have what 30 or 40 years in the tech world, and I've had lots of fun with lots of things. But after a having done some PHP in the early days and worked with very old PHP versions like 4.5 and 4.6 and stuff like that, um, and maintaining some projects during a 2.5 year bike trip that my wife and I took. When we came back from that and we were starting over, I really wanted to understand open source and get involved with open source. And I dived into the Drupal world and tried to figure out how in the world you made contributions in an open source project. And it was pretty intimidating, but I really wanted to do that.
mhm.
And I did, and I made my first core patch, which was something about CSS aggregation. And WebChick insisted that it have a test, and nobody understood how in the world you would do a test for CSS aggregation. So I got sucked into building a technique to do it and finally worked on it and figured and started to learn how in the world you get attention when you want to fix something or
Mhm.
how you find out who the people are that should do it. And I got sucked in pretty fast. And I got sucked in too much. And within a year or two, I was totally burned out. But it was way fun and it suckered me in. And it was an amazing introduction to open source. So that
Mhm.
was how I got suckered into the Drupal world.
And which what version of Drupal was in the air at the time?
Um, well, she
Or
was
what
insisting
year,
on
if you
tests.
prefer?
She was insisting on tests. It was 2009.
Okay.
So Drupal 7 must have been in development, I guess.
Y- Yeah,
There
yeah.
weren't any tests until Drupal 7, and then she was insisting on tests for every new patch in Drupal 7, which was an astonishing improvement in methodology and an astonishing difference really in my life because I had always poo-pooed tests like they were too
Yeah.
much trouble. You couldn't
Right.
really do them correctly. You couldn't do enough of them. You couldn't afford to run them. You didn't have a way to run them, all those kinds of things. And now, in DDev, we have tests that run on what, 6 different platforms and take hours to run, which is a lot of um, killing of electrons and a lot of use of carbon,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
it's
You're feeling bad about the
astonishingly
carbon
effective.
footprint of all that testing, huh?
It I do, but on the other hand, we generally discover problems way early in the testing because we have such extensive test coverage and all the platforms, Mac and Windows, WSL2 and Linux. So I'm a convert, and I'm a convert because of WebCheck doing that back in the day on Drupal 7 development.
Yeah. Well, you've had a lot of conversions, I think, right? I mean, because you started out, I think, as a teacher. Do I have that correctly?
I
Or
was, in fact, I was in fact a teacher. Before that, I was an electronics technician. Um, but I taught for a year and a half. I was about, I don't know, I was in my early 20s. I looked like I was about 17. I was trying to teach high school kids that were 17. They saw me as bait and ate me alive, killed me.
oh,
Um, I
mm,
thought I would be great because my dad was a history professor and
mm,
he was one of the world's greatest teachers. I thought I'd be great. I thought I knew a lot about classroom control. I knew nothing. I uh, just went down in flames. They ate me alive. I escaped, and somehow I got a job doing documentation and development on a home automation system in the early
mm,
80s called CompuHome Systems, the tomorrow. If you can imagine early 80s and home automation. But we did
yeah.
it. We had an Apple II hooked up to a house and we were controlling that house. It wasn't a economic success because you haven't heard of it, but it was an amazing thing for me to be able to be involved with.
Yeah, okay,
It was
controlling lights and
basic.
heat and stuff, or like what did
We
it
were in
automate?
fact controlling lights and heat,
Yeah.
and doorbells, hooking up the doorbells. For jokes, we would ring the doorbell when somebody flushed the toilet. We did that. Um, so it was all in the leader of there were only three of us working on it. The leader of the project, it was in his house, not in his garage. It was in his house. So
Right.
we would wire up his house to do things that would annoy him.
That sounds good. Uh, I mean, as I've heard you describe your history before, you got pretty deep into programming. You're doing like assembly language as well as, basic and things like that, right?
Yeah, yeah, I've worked in lots of things. I used to be able to just spit out 6502 assembly language without trouble, and I worked in I got to work on another fantastic project, which was the early days of cellular data. That we're on 5G now. 1G was called CDPD, cellular
Right.
digital packet data. That was
Yeah.
the very, very first round, and I got to work on a component of that with an amazing team. It was so much fun. And so we were on Solaris, which was a variety of Unix
Oh yeah.
back
Sun
in the day.
Microsystems.
It was,
I had a Sun workstation in my house at one point, so I'm familiar
you
with that.
did. Wow.
Yeah. It's my pride and joy. I
You,
used to joke about, going home to spend time with my son.
that's right. Um, anyway, it was an amazing team, and we had so much fun figuring out the debugging techniques, which were fundamental. Because when you're trying to figure out how packets are going or not going um, through kernel modules, you have to
Yeah.
develop whole new techniques. And the team that I got to work with was awesome, and it was definitely a highlight. It was a great thing. And that was in the I don't know, late 90s, mid 90s, probably mid 90s.
Okay. So when did you first intersect with DDEV? How did that come into the picture?
Yeah, so I kind of burned out on Drupal because I tried to take on too much, and I ended up doing some DevOps work. Tagline Consulting was very kind to take me on, and I was doing DevOpsy kind of work with them. I've always known how to spin up a web environment just fine using using whatever tools are on the machine. Because on Windows or Mac, you can run Apache or Nginx, and you can run PHP. You can do all the things that DDEV does for you these days in a straightforward way. You can do that,
Hmm.
but to do it exactly or similar to the way a host does it is different. And Tag One had me working on a project where we used Puppet and VirtualBox and
Right.
Vagrant
Yeah.
to bring up a machine that was exactly the same as the client production machine. And I worked on that for, I don't know, 2, 3 years or something. And it was really interesting. It was really slow to build. It was painful to build. It wasn't that fast to run, but it was exact. The
Yeah.
same Puppet recipe that was used for the actual machine was used for your local dev. So it was exact. And so it was, it
Yeah.
was quite a learning opportunity that way.
I mean,
Um,
VirtualBox and VMware and the things like that would build a a complete, you know, Unix machine or,
that's right.
running in some kind of container, uh, well, on the system. I had them, and they were, you know, good and bad, right? They they let you model your environment precisely, which is very helpful when you're pushing stuff up to big systems. Um, but they were slow. They required a lot of memory, a lot of resources.
It was
To,
it was very impressive, and uh,
yeah, yeah,
some of those tools are still around. VirtualBox, you can still use in some contexts. I tried to use it the other day. It didn't, kind of went down in flames. I don't remember why I was experimenting with it, but it's pretty obsolete in the days of Docker.
yeah,
But things slowed down on that project, and so I was looking around for. I I just I get anxious when I don't have a project to work on. So I love having something to work on. I'm certainly old enough that people say, well, why aren't you retired? Why aren't you out riding your bike all the time? It's like I get anxious. I love having something important to do, something that other people depend on. I love helping people. And so I got anxious about that and started looking around for work and tweeted. And this company, a new company called Drud, was um, I don't know, they hired me out of it. Like they they said, well, have you done any Go? And I'm like, let's go. I didn't know what the language Go was, didn't know what or why. Um, and what
So,
they're
so they hired you as a Go programmer, and you didn't know how to program in Go.
I
Is
didn't
that
know
what
how to
I'm?
program Go. I didn't know what Docker was. I didn't know what Kubernetes was.
Yeah,
I didn't know it was amazing drinking through a fire hose. This is about 2016. Their goal was to build a competitor to the likes of Platform or Pantheon, and their goal was to do it in a Kubernetes-based environment. Kubernetes is like, I don't know, Docker on steroids, running a gazillion Docker containers at the same time and managing
yeah,
them. And it's used widely in a number of environments, but it's very complex and it's very
yeah.
difficult to manage.
Oh yeah.
And they went through a number of iterations of trying to build their hosting environment using Kubernetes. I didn't like it very much because I found it very, very difficult to manage and keep up. And of course, they had a very tiny team. They were vastly underfunded, a super tiny team. Uh, vast, just like I said, vastly underfunded. But I didn't find the hosting very interesting and didn't have much hope in the actual hosting thing. So, but they let me work on the component that was the local development part, which became
Yeah.
DDEV very quickly. It became DDEV very, very early in that process.
W-
And
Was
they
it was
let me
it
work
was it
on that.
called DDEV when you first intersected with it? or did that name come from somewhere
Um,
else?
well, it was a component of this DRUD system at the very beginning, but it got named to DDEV like really, really early, like maybe at the second that it got spun off into its own repository.
Is
And
is the first D Drud, and then it's Drud's
it
development
might be
environment?
Drupal, it might be Drupal, it might be DRUD. Um, I don't think anybody actually knows
Oh, interesting.
where that DDEV name comes from, but it was a great name. Um, anyway, I they they were kind enough to let me essentially maintain that and only give passing acknowledgement to all the other things they were doing for 5 years or almost 5 years. Um, after that, they lost their funding, and so they went away. The job went away, but I just kept maintaining TDEV, and it was a great thing. Working along on that and keeping that going. But that's how that transition happened from Drupal to DevOps to DDEV itself. The
Yeah.
generosity of them letting me work on, and I'm really interested in local dev, and well, you can tell. So I've got a little expertise in that area.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No doubt. Uh, did you ever use any other local development environments, for example? Did you ever use Acquia's Dev Desktop product or
I
MAMP or things like that?
Yeah. I tried. I It's been a long, long time since I've actually deliberately done um, extensive web development, um, except for testing, which I do all the time, of course. But
Hmm.
I've certainly used MAMP. I have no idea why it's slow. It shouldn't be slow. I don't know why it is. I've
Oh,
absolutely used Lando and its predecessor, Calabox, and I've
yeah.
absolutely used um, I think I try out things. Um, you know, they're they're all all the Docker-based ones are similar in concept, and
Yeah.
it's always interesting to learn from all of them. The um, they're so I've used them all. One of the things that I found early on, I was really actually quite a skeptic about DDEV and Docker um, because I was one of those people that always did know how to run Nginx or Apache with PHP and MySQL on
Right.
whatever environment, and I could make it work. So being one of those people that could do that, I thought, well, why would you do this? What is the purpose? But when I realized that even though I could bring up my current project just fine using any of those tools, I couldn't run two or three or four or five different projects with different requirements. I
Hmm.
didn't, I mean, I might be able to figure out how to do that, but I wouldn't be able to maintain it if I did.
Right.
Um, so having different versions of MySQL or MariaDB running on the same machine is a lot of work. Having
Yep.
even different PHP versions is an enormous amount of work. And that's when I started realizing the enormous value to run a bunch of different things that had their own configuration and that it would manage configuration and that they could all run at the same time and be just fine. That's when I was sold on the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at some level, DDEV is maybe more than some level, like maybe definition. It's a layer on top of Docker. So all the things, right? All the things that DDEV does, you could just open up a Docker container and install PHP and MySQL and Nginx and whatever other kind of environments you're installing. But you know, like I could do that, and it'll take me all day to get like sort of a semi-working thing. As opposed to I fire up DDev and 2 minutes later I'm working.
Yeah, right.
I'll often over the course of a day, create like a dozen new DDev environments because I'm doing all sorts of crazy things. Um, it's a that thank heavens I have a 2 terabyte disk on my laptop here because uh, a a third of that is ancient DDev containers at this point. That Hey, while I have you here, how do I clean those up? Uh, uh, Totally screwing up my interview here, but maybe we'll get to that later. I will. I'll actually put a section later on. Let's talk about future or things like that. But yeah, no, that's great stuff. I'd like if I could ask you a little bit about the communities that you are involved with. I'll give you one thing to sort of start you off. I'm involved with the Backdrop project as
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
I think and so I was in a meeting with the Backdrop people yesterday, and I mentioned that I was going to be talking to you today, and separately the project leaders of Backdrop, unbeknownst to each other, said, I asked them, "Do you have any questions?" And they're like, "No, just tell him how much we love him." He- he's you are inspiring them at least in terms of how terrifically you support the project, how good the documentation is, how smooth things run. And in particular, they seem to think that you're a Superman because you seem to be everywhere. Anytime anyone asks a question, if somebody's walking along the highway and, you know, shouts out loud a question about DDev, you're right there next to them explaining what.
You know, uh, Stas, uh, Stas Zook, my co-maintainer, and I, we both just love supporting people. We love knowing that people are using it and finding out how we can help them, finding out how we can learn from their questions. And we just love it, which is it is a characteristic of VDEV that we try to give the best support in the world, and we actually do better support than any commercial project I've ever known about. We love it. We just love doing that. And of course, we love the Backdrop folks and we love all the communities that have been involved. But we've been, we implemented Backdrop support way back at the beginning of the fork, I think. Um, and I think more users of Backdrop have started using it recently, which we're very happy to have. But um, we think very highly of all these different communities. Craft CMS adopted DDEV as their standard maybe 2 years ago, and I spoke at their .all conference maybe that year or the next year. Um, the Typo 3 adopted us as standard years and years ago. Um, some of the other folks are newer, like CakePHP and Compao, and if that's how you say it, and they've been putting us in their docs as their standard way to do local dev. And even Drupal has made a decision to specify or to name DDev as a default, which for Drupal to make a decision like that is very, very unusual. It's, you know, just Drupal never wants to offend anybody and never wants to make a particular decision. And for them to say, well, let's just say DDev. We won't exclude anything, but let's
Oh
just say
yeah,
DDev.
yeah, yeah.
That's a very, very impressive thing to do given the community's avoidance of specifying things, that kind of thing.
I have to say I was initially very much against that. I protested when I heard that. And the at least part of that was because Mike and Alec, who run the Lando
Okay,
project,
yeah, yeah.
were in the Drupal users group I ran in Oakland. So I was there on the very front line that as Lando was born,
Yeah.
and it felt sort of disloyal. I meant to say this. I'll say for the purpose of our audience. I met Randy at DrupalCon this last May, and we just happened to be standing in line at an espresso machine at a booth, and we got to chatting, and you know. As I was already talking with him, I saw his badge. I was like, "Oh, you're Randy Fay. I've heard of you. So now you're a friend of mine, and so and now I can comfortably use DDEV without feeling like I'm betraying my friends. I have to just choose between them.
We've never had any feeling beside companion with like the Lando or the Doxels of the world. They have the same problems, encounter the same difficulties, they solve the same problems. We've always felt like they were collaborators rather than competitors. But we do, um, DDEV has been growing in its usage, and we're happy to be working with everybody. And Lando's gone out of its way to make sure that it doesn't conflict with DDEV, and DDEV's gone out of its way to make sure that you can have both running on the same system, preferably not at the same time, like stop one when you're using the other. But
Yeah,
um,
I've
I,
run them
I
at this.
think they,
I've run them at the same time.
yeah,
You have
yeah.
to they battle for ports, but as long as you're not everyone doesn't want to use port 80, then you can make it work.
And you can configure both of them just fine for that. DDEV in a recent release actually added a feature where it'll go find an available port if it finds conflict.
Oh
And
yeah.
that is just to help with support on users. Most people should be using 80 and 443 for most of their projects, but we did add a feature where if it finds that those are in use, it just uses an available port.
Yeah, I'll tell you there's something on my Mac that's using port 443 and I can't find out what it is. So I have to work around that. And
The DDEV docs will tell you how to do that. Just look for port conflict and you'll find
I,
out how to.
as I say, I'm sure I could just shout it out to the universe and you'd be there answering the question.
I
So
would. Yeah.
there,
We
that's
won't
it.
go there right now.
All right, we only have a few minutes left in my recording thing, although maybe we can figure out something.
We
But
can start over if you want, or we can start over with a paid account, whatever you like.
all right. I was going to throw this near the end, and I don't know if this is the end or if we're in the middle somehow. But given that this is 2025, I can't not say the words AI since it's contractually has to be in every tech conversation. So let me ask you the question that everybody asks everybody these days is how do you see AI interacting with what you're doing? Do you?
You know,
Is it
I
involved?
find I find AI very useful and very stupid at the same time, and very hallucinogenic. They keep saying that they're going to solve that problem of hallucinations, but I find that it makes up answers
Oh yeah,
far more than I would appreciate.
yeah, yeah,
I don't know whether that's more in tech. It seems to just make up an answer that it would do if it was a developer. Like, yeah, there's this environment variable called blah, blah, blah.
yeah,
And the reality is there is no such thing. Maybe there ought to be. It's a great idea, but it
yeah.
doesn't exist. And so as far as DDEV, I have no idea how it would relate to DDEV. We have talked about, Oprah Shaw and I have talked about making an agent that would answer people's questions, and we've made one or two, and they'd work a bit, but they'd also give stupid answers
Yeah.
or incorrect or old answers. And, our Discord channel is not so busy that we can't just give the correct answer with a real human being.
Yeah.
So we just we try to keep our docs good, keep the Stack Overflow channel up with real human answers and answer on Discord. And um, yeah, AI has, I get it, at least 50, maybe 50% of the time, I get something useful or learn something new when I ask ChatGPT. That is fantastic.
Hmm.
When ChatGPT suggests an approach that I wouldn't have thought of, that is great. But when I'm dealing with an actual technical problem and ask a question and it makes up an approach, it's like really annoying. So,
I
so it just that's how it's going to bring down the world, I guess, is by people
yeah.
believing what it says when it has no clue.
I've actually found in my use that there's um it's helpful for computer things very specifically because you can test it. Like if you ask it a question about history, it can tell you something you may, it's like, is that true? I don't know. But you can ask it to write a piece of code that does something, and then you can run that code. If it doesn't work, you know right away, right? It fails. And if it works, you're good. You're like, oh,
When
okay.
Well, that's the whole point. If you're smart enough to understand how to test what it says, how to understand what it says and to test what it says, you are in such a great situation. But think about how many people are using ChatGPT that aren't smart enough to do what you just described. And so they just plug it into a nuclear holocaust, and it is a catastrophic problem. When ChatGPT learns how to test its own answers, then we will really be somewhere because that would allow it to control its hallucinations and try something instead of forcing you to try it. And that really is
Maybe
something.
maybe that's the new frontier. We were talking about addressing time zone challenges, right? You what why don't you tell me a little bit about working with users around the world?
So you were saying that you, being on the west coast of the U.S., have problem with all those East Coasters and how early they get up, or I guess they get up at the same time as everybody else, but
From my
it's way
perspective.
before you get up. So I was just saying that an enormous number of PDEV users are in Europe, and so when I wake up in the morning, I usually have some questions on, especially in Discord or Slack or whatever, and um, the I have a tendency to answer the question that I thought they asked instead of the one that they actually asked because
Hmm.
I'm knee jerking, and that's a problem. I should do something about that. But the great news is that my co-maintainer Stas is in Ukraine, so he's been up all night. He's been up for hours, and his answer has already gone into those things. He loves doing support just like I do, and so he's already gone in and given them a really outstanding answer, typically with more, since he's a real PHP developer, whereas once was a PHP developer. He's a real PHP developer, so he often has a better context for people than I do. I have more, I have all these years of Drupal experience, but he his basic home territory is Laravel. But as a
Okay.
real professional PHP developer, he'll be looking at things in Composer or PHP or the web or whatever that I'm like, wow, how would I have known that? And I'm just blown away. But both of us love to do this stuff, and we love to figure out what and why people are asking, what things they're stumbling on, and we love to help them out with that. So it's amazing working with somebody that also likes to do that. It's a real delight.
Yeah, that brings up an interesting question, one that's actually close to my heart. Is I'd be curious to hear your perspective on different communities and how they process things. To set that up, I'm aware within the Drupal world of things that we talk about within the Drupal world that I suspect the rest of the world sees differently, and both in terms of non-technical people, people that aren't, full-time programmers or web developers, and also other systems. I'm always amazed to see um, how different adherents of different technologies view things, and how seemingly unaware of the other ways of viewing things they see. So you are in a particularly good spot to see these because you've got users of very, very different technologies intersecting with you. So I'd like to hear your perspective on that. How do the communities uh, are they are they different? Are they the same? What are they like?
They have different personalities by far. As you know, Drupal is a very, very huge community with tolerance for everybody. And one of the characteristics of Drupal is that this actually has moderated over the last decade or so, but one of the characteristics of Drupal is the inability to make a decision because any person can interrupt the decision-making process, especially any person with any history or clout can
Right.
just say, well, I don't like this, and it's dead. And that was for a long time a problem. And it's still, Drupal is very gentle. For example, the project lead Dries is gentle, very, very
Yeah.
gentle, even when he's leading explicitly, like he is now with the Drupal CMS project. He's still gentle. He's
Yeah.
just he's just a very gentle um, person, and the whole community is like that. But that has spin-off effects that are quite dramatic of inability to push forward on things that maybe one person or one group would like to push forward on. So that's a classic kind of thing. Uh, Typo 3, which is a major uh, DDEV community, major uh, mostly in Europe, and they're they seem to be able to push forward without that. I think maybe they're not top down, but they may be more agency led, or I don't know, or maybe I don't perceive the things um, like maybe I would in the Drupal world. Craft CMS is company led, so it is a company uh, open source project, but the company has control of it mostly, and so they don't have that same class of problem. And of course, um, although we have many WordPress users, we're not the WordPress world is so big that you can't comprehend it or understand it or talk about one community or anything. But we haven't ever figured out how to be directly engaged with WordPress. And no matter what I know what you probably think of the current WordPress drama and stuff like that, but the ability of WordPress to make technical decisions and to pursue feature directions is admirable, and has led to them being in the position that they're in, despite the position that they're in right now. So,
I'm more sympathetic to WordPress's position than a lot of other Drupal people are because while we have a front row seat to kind of inter-tech squabbles, as it were, the makers takers and things like that were WordPress has been talking about. I've always found I think a large part of WordPress success comes from the fact that Matt Mullenweg, when he started, was not at all technical, was a blogger. And I feel like maybe for that reason, WordPress has been very cognizant and sympathetic to new users that don't know anything, and it treats them with with more respect and helpfulness than a lot of the
I
other
think
platforms do.
I think Craft CMS is like that as
Oh,
well.
okay.
Um, and interestingly, it's also a company-led project. It it is interesting. I mean, Drupal up through Drupal 7 was a little friendlier. You didn't have to understand Composer or lots of things. And
Hmm.
Backdrop is the continuation of that, which I know you're involved with.
Yeah.
And that is it's a great thing. So
Yeah, yeah. Not wanting to hijack the conversation, but specifically within the Backdrop project, not only is it sort of continuing Drupal 7's friendliness, it started out very much wanting to move further in that direction to make it not just continuing Drupal 7's friendliness, but to make it friendlier, moving towards the um, inclusive perspective at that point.
yeah,
But
yeah.
we get to that some of the points. Let's bring it back to your world. We've talked about DDev's past and your involvement and present. Let's talk about the future a little bit. What's on the roadmap? Are there continue along or let me not guide it too much, but what's coming up or what would you like to see coming up?
We have um, we have a number of things that are on the agenda that we're actively working on. Um, one thing that I should have been working on this week and wasn't. Oh, we have a tendency to be so support oriented that when a problem starts to crop up for anybody, we drop everything and go try to solve that problem. So we're always, as you know, with a big project like this, you've got always lots of those kind of things. And if they're interrupting people or annoying people, we have a tendency, both Stas and I have a tendency to just like want to go and just solve that. And that's really, really good because that's part of the reason that DDEV has a great user experience and that people do have a consistent experience with it. But it also means that we don't work as carefully as we ought to on the long-term perspective and the future features and that kind of thing. But we do have a couple of probably three big things in the hopper right now. One is we've been a supporting Node uh, quite successfully, but as kind of a side thing in
No,
DDEV. So
Node.js, you're saying?
Node.js, yeah.
Okay.
So we support Node.js, and you can run one or many node daemons inside the web container with very little configuration. It
Oh,
works very nicely, and people use it when there's a node backend. But
yeah.
there are people that want to use Node as the front end. They want it to be behind Nginx. They want it to be on port 443. And that is not hard to do right now, but it's complex. It requires a little bit of fiddling with the Nginx configuration. And so we want to make Node.js an official first class project type and web server type. And so that we're gonna do that.
If I was to
Uh,
say that would be a form of supporting headless approaches. Would that be accurate to phrase it that way?
yeah, that's a good way of doing headless. Although you can already do headless just fine if Drupal is the main. Like if you're doing headless Drupal, Drupal would be the main project, and you would run the head on a different port. But this would allow you to run Drupal on a different port and the head elsewhere. So they'll both work. We'll see how it works. It'll be experimental. So
Mhm.
that's one project. A second project, which is actually being funded by the Typo 3 project's contribution ideas. We won I don't know, one is not the right word, but they have graciously granted essentially a grant to integrate um, XH GUI into DDEV. Now we have already had XHGUI is a wrapper on XHProf, which is a great long-term uh, profiling, performance profiling app. And
Yeah.
DDEV supported XHProf for quite a while. Actually, uh, Tag One uh, supported Tag One funded the original development of that, and a lot of the developers of Tag One have enjoyed that in the meantime. But it's relatively well, in some contexts, it's relatively complex to use, and XHGUI, which is another project, makes it really, really easy to use. And DDEV community member Tyler36 has been maintaining a DDEV add-on for that for really some time, and it's become an official add-on, but it was still a little complex to use. And so the project that Typo3 is funding is making that mainstream, making it easy to use for everybody. And so that we'll be doing that in this quarter. We've already started the work on it. We'll be doing that in this quarter, and we're very grateful. We're very thankful to both Typo3 for the funding on that, and to Tyler36 for his amazing time of making that mainstream and maintaining that add-on.
Yeah, so XH GUI, the GUI part of that is the user interface on top of XH Prof.
Yeah,
Makes
exactly. Yep,
XH Prof more accessible to a wider
that's right.
audience.
That's right. Yeah, that's
Terrific.
exactly it.
All right,
And
what's the
then
third thing?
the third thing is our add-ons have gotten out of control. We have like I don't know, there's more than 100 add-ons that people have built. There's more than I think there's more than 20 official ones that we actually monitor and maintain, or that are official maintained known add-ons. But if you do a DDEV add-on list dash dash all, it's a little overwhelming and hard to figure out what you wanted. And so we are working on a registry for that, probably web-based, web-based registry instead of what we currently do is search GitHub for things with particular tags. And what we want to do is provide a web-based registry, and preferably the web-based registry will have the ability for people to put comments and to rate add-ons so that you'll
Okay.
be able to look at it and see what's most likely to be useful.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, I I vote for that one. I'm always finding it seems like every week I'll find a new, DDEV feature I didn't realize that is super helpful, DDEV describe, for example, to let me know what's going on. DDEV list, uh, DDEV launch is brilliant. So yeah, discovering those things is great. And similarly, we were talking about setting up other environments and how DDEV makes it a lot easier to do things that you can do other ways, but that are just time consuming. So, setting up PHP admin on DDEV is just comically easy compared to how it is on other platforms, or enabling Xdebug, stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah, we're very proud of how easy it is to get Xdebug. You don't have to do anything to get Xdebug working. It works. Essentially, the only time it ever doesn't work is when somebody has tried to, except when somebody's tried on WSL2 to
Yeah, yeah,
change the configuration of it so it doesn't use the default. That is about the only kind of questions we ever get on.
yeah, yeah. Interesting. All right, so since we touched on roadmap and future things, let's talk about resourcing. You mentioned you and Stas, and I'm aware. Why don't you talk about that? Platform SH has wonderfully supported you for a while, but they're changing that support a little bit, right?
Yeah, so at when there's lots of happy things in the history of DDEV, and one of the happy things was when Drud went away, when it lost its funding, Tag One stepped in right away to try to figure out ways to fund the project, and they did it by funding particular initiatives, like I said, the XH Prop one, and they actually funded Mutagen as well, which is a crazy thing for Windows and Mac users. It helps so much. So they did that, and so there was about a year and a half where there was kind of casual funding of various types, but there were uh, some significant frictions because the Drud sold its bones to a an agency that thought it was going to do something to continue on that hosting project, and they owned the trademark and they wanted to control the DDEV project, and it just wasn't going to work out.
Uh,
It was just not it was just not going to work out, and platform.sh stopped in at that time and had some previous conversations about the trademarks and the IP, and platform worked a deal where they got the trademark and the domain names for DDEV, and at the same time in order to fund the DDEV project, they hired me as an employee, which, oh, it solved so many things. I was going to have to fork the project. It was going to have a new name. It was going to be confusing to people. And Platform, by stepping in and doing that, uh, you know, and then funding the project these last couple of years by funding me as an employee, it was just a lovely contribution to the DDEV project. Well, like
yeah,
a lot of places, Platform has been trying to figure out ways to uh, improve their net cash flow, and they've decided to change from funding me as an employee, and they have decreased their support, but they're going to continue as what we call what do we call it? We call it a partner level of membership. They're still going to fund DDEV very significantly, €3,000 a month to
mm,
the DDEV Foundation. So the DDEV Foundation is the fiscal entity for DDEV. It's a U.S. nonprofit, 501(c)(3). Um, Obviously, it's a very simple thing, but that's where the bank account is and all those kinds of things. So they're going to change their funding to do it that way. Which, on the one hand, it is a obviously I'm going to have some changes to adjust to, but it doesn't. That's all fine. But it gives the DDEV Foundation more flexibility in how that money is used,
yeah,
and obviously the support remains at a significant and valuable amount that they're going to do. And it may we were talking about it in the advisory group meeting this week, and our it may be a path to getting Stas funded for most of his time. So that's good. But we want people to understand that both Stas and I are working all the time to make sure that their experience is good, and that what they what they are encountering is supported, and that their problems get sorted out, and that as technologies change, that we're there and we're trying to figure it out, and that they need to individually and as organizations support this so that that can be sustainable in the future. So we have been working on that for a long time to try to make sure that that's public and understood. But most, you know, individuals, yes, but most CMS organizations and most hosting organizations and most agencies should be figuring out how much DDEV is worth to them, and they should be coughing up that amount. And we do invoicing, we do all the things. We make it easy. We can accept any kind of payments. Invoicing is probably the best for these organizations. We do, we do ACH, we do everything. It's not hard to do, except it's hard to part with the money. We know it's hard to part with the money, but
Yeah.
it's also a hard thing if DDEV doesn't have the support in the future that you want.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was, you give me a lot of time, and I appreciate it. So I want to, the end was within sight, and you actually predicted my penultimate question, which is partially, what can what can we do? What can we, the rest of the world, do to support the great work that you're doing? And you mentioned the financial support, and in fact, let me give you another crack at that. Like specifically, let's say some viewer of this video is like, okay, let's go contribute to DDEV. Where where's the front door? Where should they go?
Well, there's two easy front doors. One is um, just ddev.com/support-ddev that tells you how to do that. And the GitHub sponsors page also tells you all the different ways that you can do it. It doesn't just tell you about how to use GitHub sponsors, but also, I mean, we'll invoice you. You just send us a note.
Yeah.
We do PayPal, we do GitHub sponsors, we do everything. For DDEV is a mature project in more ways than one. And we're not mature in our marketing, but we're very mature in, the fact that we have a 501(c)(3), that we have a bank account, that we have
Mhm.
all these different ways to deal with communities all over the world. It works fine. So, but don't forget that DDEV is an open source project and it's dependent on all of the members of the open source. So we love getting, um, we love, we love doing support. We love learning from you based on what you're experiencing. And we love your contributions. And we have I mentioned Tyler 36, but we have a number of great contributors who maintain add-ons, who add things to EDEV that, when they hit an annoyance, they've actually gone in and delved
Yeah.
into the actual Go code and provided amazing PRs that improved it over time. So contributing is not just financial; it's a community effort, and we love it at the support level. We love it at the PR and issue level, and we are we want to be a sustainable organization, and so we want to make sure that the finances work as well.
That you addressed the second part of the question, that you know you predicted what I was going to say, because besides the financial thing, I was going to ask about how people who are wishing to volunteer their time and energy can contribute. And you you mentioned that a little bit. Let me ask the same question I did about the financial thing. What's the front door for somebody saying, I want to go help with DDEV? Where should they go first?
Yeah, so go to the project. It's github.com/ddev/ddev, and the entire open source project is there. You'll find in the docs exactly, the docs have information about how to test a PR, how to create a PR, how to, understand the code, how to run the code. And then we've done quite a number of contributor training sessions that are on ddev.com that are both video and blog posts
Yeah.
um, that explain how to get started with if you're actually contributing to DDEV. We've done really quite a number of those. And I'll do more. I mean, if there's anything that you need to learn about contributing to DDEV or any friction that you're running into, we'll do another one. We'll help you in Discord as well. We'll help you any way that we can. But if there's an area of learning that needs to be addressed, we'll do a contributor training. We'll schedule one and do it. So we're just happy to have people contributing. And
And
by the way, even though Stas is like the world's greatest maintainer, He is the future of DDEV more than I am. I'm ancient, and we're all finite, but I'm more finite than maybe people like you. And so Stas is the future, but we are, one maintainer or two maintainers is not what will make this go into the future. We look forward to having other contributors. We always like to have contributors coming up, but we would like to have other full-time maintainers as well. So, um, I am not the future, but you as open source contributors and maintainers are the future. And we would like to have you in there as maintainers. We would like to have people as paid maintainers in the future.
Yeah. Oh, all right. Well, that was inspiring, and it shows that it helps to ask the question because I would have guessed that going to ddev.com might be a way to think, but I had no idea that there were training videos there. I mean, that's fantastic. Like that's the kind of message we should get out there. All right, so I appreciate all the time. I'm going to throw one more softball thing. You mentioned about sort of su sustainability. Let's talk non-technical. I know that you've got heroic bicycling accomplishments in your past, present, and future, and you keep yourself in great shape. You're gonna outlast me. I don't know what you're talking about. Um, but well, we talk to that for a moment.
Yeah, so a lot of people know that my wife Nancy and I have done an enormous number of bicycle touring adventures, uh, and the first the longest one that we ever did was 2.5 years from the top of Canada down to Puerto Montt, which is in the northern part of Patagonia in Chile. That was two and a half years from 2006 to 2009, and
You did a two and a
self-supported
half year bike ride?
2.5 year bike ride. Yeah,
Holy cow.
yeah. It was a trip of a lifetime. The only thing is we've done several trips of a lifetime, but that was an amazing adventure. And that, of course, is where the that got us interested. We were changing up our life, and that got the intro into Drupal because when I came back, I wanted to become not just a user of Drupal. I wanted to become a contributor and find out what open source was. But we've done a number of other things as well, and bike touring has been a big thing for us. We usually ride a tandem these days. We were riding separate bikes back then. Last year in December and January, like right now, a year ago, we were riding. We went back to Patagonia to this place where we ended our trip in 2009, and we put together our tandem and we put the panniers on and all of our camping gear, and we started riding south on the Carretera Austral, which is the road that runs down the Chile side into Patagonia. And so we took a 2 year trip, sorry, 2 month trip last year, working on that, and we had, some,
Which for you is a short trip.
yeah, it was a very significant trip, and we had some challenges on that, and there were some hard places. Some things were easier than we expected. Some things were harder than we expected. But we did do that last year, and so we do a lot of bike riding. We uh, we probably have something on the agenda this year, so I might. I'm talking with a friend about riding the New Mexico section of the Great Divide mountain bike ride uh, in starting in late May, which is probably about a month's trip, um, self-supported on mostly dirt roads. I did ride that the other direction in 2003, but there were parts that we couldn't do then because it was muddy, and you
Mhm.
can't make a bike work in mud of that type. So that is on the possible agenda for this year.
That's fantastic. All right, so Randy Fay, well, I gotta say what a thrill this has been for me to do this. I appreciate your time, as does everybody else. We all are immensely grateful for what you do to the community, do for the community. And
It was great talking with you, and I look forward to hearing more about Backdrop in the future. Always been a fan of Backdrop.
wonderful to hear that. All right,
All
sir.
right. Thanks
Take
so
care.
much.